Is the presentation for my final linguistics paper, and I chose to do it on how immersion programs impact second language learners. So I looked into two people who were the same age and in the same state, but they did different immersion programs and languages. I learned about how immersion programs have many different benefits. So for subject one, she was a 19-year-old white female, and she did Chinese immersion at Yinghua Academy, and she doesn't really speak Chinese anymore. And then subject two was also a 19-year-old white female, but she did Spanish immersion, and that was through Little Canada Elementary School. And she does still speak Spanish. She's continuing it through college at school in Utah, and she's actually minoring in Spanish. So these two languages, Chinese and Spanish, differ in their linguistic structure as well as how the grammatical meaning is encoded. So that led me to my question: how does immersion programs shape the way children learn English while learning another language, Chinese and or Mandarin? So for part one, I looked into morphology, and that is the study of word structure and how grammatical meaning is expressed through morphemes, which are the smallest unit of language that carry meaning. In English, morphology is important because it shows grammatical information such as tense, number, and agreement, which are crucial for creating meaningful and accurate sentences. For bilingual people, morphology is shaped by what they hear around them in English as well as patterns from their other language. So, subject 2 learns Spanish and has a good understanding of morphological processes in Spanish, which helped her to see the patterns and connect them to English. So, I remember her telling me how she struggled a little bit with over-regularization, specifically like the verb ir in Spanish, which means to go in English, and that's an irregular and actually is fue um, in the past tense. But since she sees the similarities in morphology between English and Spanish, this was easy for her to fix and easy for her to recognize those patterns and just be well versed in those in both languages. And then subject one, since Chinese and English are pretty different languages, like they're pretty vastly different, she did not really catch on to the patterns as much as subject two. So when I asked her about over-regularization, she couldn't really come up with an idea and just said how they were so structurally different as languages. Part 2, I looked at language ideologies, which are the beliefs and assumptions about languages and language learners. Those could be stereotypes and hierarchies about certain languages and people that speak those languages. So the ideologies impact what outsiders think about language learners as well as the language learners themselves. As discussed in class, language ability is frequently judged through racialized expectations rather than actual language proficiency. So, subject one experienced a ton of assumptions, and people were often surprised since she is a white woman speaking Chinese, just because that's not what society typically deems as not acceptable, but just expected of a Chinese speaker. So, she had a lot of people that were kind of confused or surprised when they heard or found out that she could speak Chinese. And then, subject two, since Spanish is more common for reasons like job opportunities and travel, people kind of applauded her for this, and she uses Spanish as skills for her job as a swim instructor, talking with families that speak Spanish, and then as well as for traveling. She's gone to many places like the Galapagos Islands, Dominican Republic, and Ecuador, and she used her Spanish language in all of those places. Part 3, I looked at language acquisition. So both of them were exposed to English first at home and then introduced to their second language at the age of 5 in kindergarten at the respective immersion schools. The patterns described by subject 1 and subject 2 are closely related to those of other young children learning another language and how it changes throughout the person's lifetime. So learning basic English literacy later than monolingual classmates, this was something that they both experienced. Subject 1 actually talked about how she learned how to read in Chinese before she learned how to read in English. I thought that was really interesting. They did not receive proper English spelling instruction in their time in immersion elementary schools, so they both have ongoing trouble with English vocabulary and spelling. They talked about how in high school, when they were almost all in English class with their classmates who are pretty much always monolingual, they experienced it a lot more spelling issues than their classmates. They both said they struggle with knowing basic American history, as that was not taught as a part of their immersion programs in elementary school. So things like just the basic history as well as geography. Subject 2 talked about how she had to teach herself the 7 continents in high school because she wasn't ever taught that in elementary school, as well as both of them not knowing the states and state capitals in the United States. And that was something that I learned in my school, in public English school, and that was taught. I knew all of the states and capitals by the age of 10, and I was surprised that that was something they did not learn at all in their immersion programs. And then in early stages of learning, both subjects described relying on translating in their head before speaking or completing academic tasks. So before they could just speak in their languages, they had to translate in their head, which is something that I saw was common with other bilingual children. So this paper looked into how 2 different early immersion programs shaped the language development of Subject 1 and 2 through 2 vastly different languages, Chinese and Spanish. By focusing on morphology, the internal study of words and word meaning, we can see how immersion language structure plays an important role in how bilingual students develop their English language and grammar. Subject 1 and Subject 2 received very different results when it came to how outsiders viewed their bilingualism. That was something we saw with language ideologies, and then both learners still experience hardships when it comes to either of their 2 languages. But the benefits of bilingual education definitely outweigh the costs, and bilingual people received enhanced attention control, cognitive flexibility, and metalinguistic awareness, which is like language as a whole awareness compared to their monolingual peers. That was something that I found from one of the articles I looked at for my paper. And then on this next slide, this is just all of the references that I used in my entire paper. All right, thank you for listening. Have a great day.